تجيب لنا الكرسي الازرق اللي هناك على
يا شيخ عبد الله نحاول يا شيخ.
بسم الله، الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. جاهز؟ الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Today's reasonably brief presentation, inshallah, deals with one piece of news, item of news that came up very recently, as I just received it this early morning, and probably the decision or the news goes back to probably only yesterday or day before yesterday, something very, very fresh. In the Lok Sabha, which is like the Indian parliament, they had a new bill passed. It's called the Triple Talaq Bill, the Triple Divorce Bill. Before we get into that bill, and in order to comment on that from an Islamic perspective, it may be useful to wait talking about the bill and its particulars and begin first with something that deals with divorce in Islamic law and the spirit of it, not only the text of the Quran, but also the spirit of the system, marital system. To start with, the continuation of the family and the protection of the family is one of 5 major maqasid or supreme objectives of Sharia, protecting the family. And the issue of marriage has to be approached with care and appreciation. In fact, the best way has been the word of Allah when He described marriage or relationship between husband and wife as mithaqan ghalidha, as we see in Surah An-Nisa, a solemn agreement, oath, commitment. These are all. And in order to have the wasati, also the Islam is a just, balanced way, the way of life, as Allah described. وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. Allah made you a just, balanced ummah or community of believers. Islam did not go to the other extreme in protecting the family and that solemn oath by preventing talaq under any circumstances, because there may be some error in the choice of spouses. There might be some circumstances that make life impossible. Cannot really be a happy type of family with the continuation. So as much as possible to protect marriage, but also not to go to the other extreme. There is a hadith, some versions of which some ulama consider it weak, but there is one that was narrated by Abu Dawood and Al-Hakim. And Al-Hakim actually hassana, means consider it good. It's not the highest degree, but it is good and acceptable. Basically, it refers to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, أبغض الحلال إلى الله عز وجل الطلاق. One of the things, or the most hated act, which is still permissible, halal still, it's not haram, to Allah, in the sight of Allah, is divorce. So that is basically where we start, how the Quranic vision of the family and its importance is. A second observation that have nothing to do directly with the bill that we're going to, inshallah, refer to, is that realizing that human beings differ, even the closest and most loving relationship between husband and wife, people are different. So there are some issues that may arise that each side is able to forgive the other for it. So that doesn't require much of a legislation, really, because we all face that. Many of you are married, and no matter what, there may arise some tension, some problem, and that's easy, usually is resolved. If the dispute becomes a little bit unmanageable or severe, even though one side or the other try to have sabr, perseverance, and gentleness, but still problem is not resolved, then the Quran provides a number of steps to deal with that. And the biggest problem with those who keep talking about Islam and talking about how unfair, quote unquote, the marriage and divorce law in Islam is, they don't understand what they're talking about because they don't relate it to the broader framework of marital relationship, even the Quranic guidance when there are disputes. We can say at least there is one step to start with, the Quran urges. Actually multiple steps, but still might say in one stage. Basically between husband and wife in their own privacy, talking things over, trying to see if they can come, into some agreement to make things livable and adjust to one another. Okay? But there is more than one. And we're not going to detail that now because inshallah we hope that in the third Friday of January, I think the 19th, I believe, inshallah we're going to start a comprehensive series on women and Muslim family. It's a very sensitive topic. Inshallah we'll deal with some of the more difficult questions and unfair or misconceived ideas about women in Islam and the importance and role of family. So inshallah we'll leave that for that time, but at least I'm trying to give a broad framework to be able to comment Islamically, but intelligently also on this new legislation in India. So we said first step or first steps in one stage between husband and wife. And this is very wise, subhanallah. Yani even wise people can agree with that, let alone the divine wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when He encouraged us to follow those steps. Because sometimes a dispute that goes to outsiders might start magnifying, and like some Egyptians say, يَعْمِلْ مِلْحَبَّ أُبَّ, you make out of a mole, you make a mountain. So between husband and wife in their privacy, they best know each other and best are able to resolve their problem. If it doesn't work, the Quran also guides towards mediation / arbitration, if need be. Mediation or arbitration. I'm not going to take time to explain the difference between mediation and arbitration. I'm getting somebody to help the parties resolve their problem. وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ شِقَاقَ بَيْنِهِمَا فَابْعَثُوا حَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهِ وَحَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهَا إِنْ يُرِيدَ إِصْلَاحًا يُوَفِّقِ اللَّهُ بَيْنَهُمْ. If you feel really that the dispute will really get too much between them, meaning husband and wife, send one arbitrator from her family or arbiter from her family, one from his family, and if those arbitrators want to make reforms sincerely, Allah will help them fulfill that. So that's another stage. Suppose this doesn't happen. Now, what we hear from people who don't understand Islam, even among Muslims, is that, but mostly come from Orientalists and Islamophobes. They say divorce in Islam is very simple. All you have to say to your wife, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you, 3 times. And that's it. As if sometimes when somebody raised that issue, when we have like interfaith meetings or something, and some person understands it this way, I tell him, like this, to say that divorce in Islam is very simple by saying these 3 words, it's just like saying that marriage in Christianity, for example, is very, very simple. You stand before the priest and say, I do, I do, I do. That trivializes marriage. Because before you say, I do, both sides were researching one another. Both sides have been discussing how their life should be and all of that. And I do is just the last thing. Like they say, the cherry on the cream. That's it. So don't trivialize Islam, divorce in Islam, because if I say also Christianity is easy to manage, all you have to say are 3 words, I do, I do, I do. That's trivialization. And that seemed to be also the assumption in the minds of the Indian legislators when they passed that bill. So it behooves us then to raise that question. If actually divorce takes place, can it be done 3 times in one sitting and that's it, would be final? Or what is the Quranic and Hadithic, the Hadith or Sunnah of the Prophet guidance in this issue? To start with, in reference to the Quran itself, I think it's Surah Al-Baqarah, At-talaqu marratan. Divorce is 2 times. I'll come to explain that. What does it mean? It means that all of the previous steps fail to reconcile the husband and wife and solve their problems. Then a person divorces the first time, divorce his wife the first time. But unlike what some people believe, it's so simple and women are just like treated like thing to get rid of, easily. No. A Muslim cannot divorce his wife, for example, during her feminine period, the cycle during menstruation, for example. And subhanAllah, Allah has the hikmah also in this, because during that period she might be touchy, she might be, she passes through psychological and physiological issues, and the husband perhaps might react to that and take a step that he would regret later on. So even when to divorce is restricted. I leave the details. You can't just divorce at any time because you got angry and you say, I divorce. In addition to when you can divorce, that divorce does not come effective. And I'm talking about the first revocable divorce. There are different types and details. You can do that and khalas, you're separated. In fact, there is a waiting period known as iddah. It's ayn actually, iddah, I-D-D-A-H. Even though he uttered divorce already, it doesn't mean that, go out of my house. No. In fact, he is required to keep her in his household. They abstain only from intimate relationship because of obvious reasons. I'll come to that. And that period runs approximately 3 months, but could extend to up to 9 months if, in case she's in the early pregnancy. Okay? Yani, get the point. If she's not pregnant, or no sign that she's pregnant, then at least 3 months on hold. Divorce, was uttered, but it's on hold, and he's still responsible for her, and if she has children, also for his children. That's a greater protection that is not afforded actually by the bill that was passed in India, because it's Islamic requirement. Okay. I say up to 9 months. وَأُولَاتُ الْأَحْمَالِ أَجَلُهُنَّ أَن يَضَعْنَ حَمْلَهُنَّ. The Quran is clear on this. Those women who are, meaning divorced while pregnant, their term or their iddah or waiting period, ends when they give birth. That's why I say it could be close to 9 months of complete support. All right. What could be the possible wisdom, divine wisdom behind this waiting period? Allah knows best, and nobody can claim, I know all the divine wisdom, but we can reflect, because we are commanded to reflect on the Quran and on the teaching of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One thing is to ascertain whether she is pregnant or not. And this is very important, because suppose she goes and marry after 1 week or 2, and then it's discovered that she's pregnant from her husband, that keeps our results in mix-up of lineage, which is very important in Islamic teaching. So that would be one. And of course, if she's discovered to be pregnant during that waiting period, that means, hands off. She has to wait until giving birth. So there is, again, the requirement of the iddah or waiting period. What happens during that period also, there is greater wisdom even, or great wisdom, let's say, without comparing, that it allows reconciliation. Maybe divorce took place in a period of stress of one or the other or both, or anger, even though, by the way, there are certain types of anger that make divorce invalid. Inshallah, we'll cover that in details when we start the series in January, inshallah ta'ala. Is reconciliation. Maybe being in his household, even though, of course, the intimate relationship is suspended, the physical relationship, but maybe this one side or the other or both may to say, well, it isn't really worth breaking up the family or separating. She has faults, but I have faults also. So it may result that even without outside help, that they may come together and resume their marital life. If it is before the end of that waiting period, they don't have to have a new contract, nothing. They just resume their life as usual. What happens after that, if the iddah or waiting period is over and still no reconciliation? Well, in that case, divorce becomes effective, which means she is free, to go. She's free to remarry if she wanted. From Sharia standpoint, some legal, Western legal systems have differing requirements, but I'm talking about Sharia specifically. So she's free to remarry. And if she does not marry, and her husband come after the iddah, after the 3 months, let's say, and says, honey, can we get back again, even though divorce became effective? Can we remarry? In that case, he would be obligated to seek her permission first. He doesn't have the automatic right, like during the 3 months waiting period. Okay? He have to ask her, and she have to agree. If she doesn't want him, she can say, no, I've suffered from you enough, I can't. So it is contingent on her agreement. It could be mutual agreement between the husband and wife. He would be required to pay her mahr, because the mahr that was paid before the first divorce is hers to keep. But now this is a new contract, a new mahr. And if the wife, as most jurists say, add additional conditions that is not against Sharia in that marriage, a condition like you let me complete my diploma and whatever, legitimate, non-offensive or non-capricious kind of demand, and he agrees to that. So all of these things would be as if it is totally a new marriage, except that it was his divorcee rather than another woman. Now, suppose they remarry again. Even if they did not remarry, as you know, he can return her during the waiting period. But that is still counted one. Even if he reconciled with his wife during the waiting period, it is count as one divorce. Then the same cycle can be repeated. At-talaqu marratan. He's allowed, or they're allowed, another chance to marry according to whatever agreement or conditions they agree to. And the same cycle could be repeated with all the conditions mentioned earlier, so I don't have to repeat them, okay? With the waiting period and everything. But then, and that's what brings us to the so-called, the concept of triple divorce. If the problems arose again, and after the second waiting period, they differed and want to separate, and he divorces her for the third time, that becomes irrevocable. That's it. Okay? And the Quran is quite clear on it, and inshallah I clarify some misunderstanding here. فَإِن طَلَّقَهَا فلا تحل له إن طلقها, means if he divorces her again, meaning for the third time, فلا تحل له من بعد حتى تنكح زوجا غيره. After the third divorce, that's it. It is not lawful for him to marry her again unless she gets married to another husband, and that husband divorces her, then they can get back together. That led some people who have no understanding of the language of the Quran or the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to think that a woman can simply go to another man, marry him for a day, week, or even 1 hour, okay, and consummate that marriage, and then go back again and remarry her husband. This is haram, haram, haram. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam referred to this al-kattays al-musta'ar, just like you. Some farmers would lend their ox, male ox, to fertilize his cows or whatever. Kattays al-musta'ar. It's a worst, humiliating type of division. What is meant here is that after the third divorce, when she cannot go to her husband, without any plan, she happened to find a person or somebody offered to marry her, and she thought that he would be a good person. And they lived together. No plan, no pre-plan at all. They lived together for some time, but again, they discovered that there is some problem in that marriage. And it happens that that husband divorces her. Only then she can go to her first time. This is the notion which is forbidden, known as al-muhallil, like someone whose job may be to marry a woman or something, to break the cycle so that she can. This is even if you don't know anything about Sharia or fiqh, just by common sense, is that really something that one can, a good, right, moral individual can expect? If divorce her, not by way of planning. So it means if she likes to live with him, khalas, that's it. She can't go back to her husband another time. But now we come to the issue that relates to this recent Indian legislation. The issue is whether if a person divorces his wife 3 times in one sitting, and that's what the Islamophobes and the ignorant among Muslims even sometimes think it makes it valid as irrevocable. Like, say, for example, tells her, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you. So that 3 times at once. اختصار الطريق. Does that make it really irrevocable? While some fiqh opinions say it is valid, there is a stronger opinion, and I tell you why I think this is a very strong and better opinion, is that it would be counted only once. To start with, the spirit of the Quran and the understanding of some classical scholars, I give you a name, is that when the Quran says at-talaqu marratan, talking about the revocable 2 times, not the irrevocable ones, the third. At-talaqu marratan. Imam Ibn al-Qayyim, who is the famous student of, again, the most famous Shaykh al-Islam, Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, he says, at-talaqu marratan, divorce is twice, meaning in their language, he says, even in the Arabic language, marratan ba'da marra, not at once, not piling them at once, marratan ba'da, meaning 1 time and then another time. Okay, and one time, as you know, has that waiting period anyway. Okay, so you can divorce again during the waiting period. That doesn't make any sense, really. We have to go to the cycle of waiting and iddah and the second time. So that is actually evidence from the understanding of the Quran itself. But Sunnah also seem to give a very strong evidence of the soundness of Ibn al-Qayyim's interpretation. It was narrated that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam knew of a man who divorced his wife 3 times at once. This is exactly the issue of that bill. Divorced his wife 3 times at once. The Prophet ﷺ stood up and he was really angry. And he said, I'll quote the Arabic hadith here, أَيَلْعَبُ أَحَدُكُمْ بِكِتَابِ اللَّهِ وَأَنَا بَيْنَ أَظْهُرِكُمْ. Does any one of you dare, how could any one of you dare play with the book of Allah and I am still even living amongst you, meaning the receiver of that Quran, the interpreter of that Quran, who received the guidance from Allah how to implement that Quran. You play with the word of Allah while I am still living with you, meaning if that continues, what will happen after me even? So he was very angry. Doesn't that also prove that marratan ba'da marra, you can't pile divorces no matter who says what? It's so clear, the word of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay. So this is the issue. Like I say, there is another one also that's to bear evidence from hadith, Ad-Daraqutni collection. It said that Abdullah, the son of Umar, radiallahu anhu, and that's Umar ibn al-Khattab, he divorced his wife when she was menstruating, and then followed that, or wanted to follow that by 2 other divorces so that it becomes, irrevocable. The Prophet ﷺ knew of that, and he tells him, Ya ibn Umar, O son of Umar, ما هكذا أمرك الله. This is not what Allah commanded you to do. Meaning, it is batil, it is wrong, it is haram. It is for that reason that we are clear now and ready to see what this new bill in the Indian Parliament said and what. I was helped with this with an article written by a known Indian Islamic thinker by the name of Jamal. I think those from the subcontinent. And we're not saying we agree with everything anyone says, but I think he was right in this, knowing as an Indian himself also the particulars of that bill and the situation in India. Basically, he reported what the media, for example, Al Jazeera English reported also about that news, that according to the new bill, the triple talaq, it's called like the triple talaq bill, is punishable by law, i.e., if a man divorces his wife 3 times at the same time, okay, just like a machine gun, 1, 2, 3, all in 1 minute, that actually he would be jailed up to 3 years. Up to 3 years. Now, before I narrate to you his comments on this in a practical sense, it is important to remember that Islam, in theory and practice, did respect and allow religious minorities in the matter of personal law, like marriage, divorce, custody of the children, the law of inheritance, allowed even small minorities to have their own religious authorities on that. Subhanallah, that was not only tolerance, that an amazing something and a crown of Islamic tolerance. Until these days, I was born in Egypt, and what I know is that the Coptic church in Egypt had authority over officiating marriage and divorce and all the other things, inheritance, according to their own religious teaching, even though they probably are no more than 10%. But even if they're 1%, they're guaranteed that. Under the Ottoman Empire or Khilafah, the same thing was guaranteed if you look at Al-Majalla Al-Adliya that used to have some of the laws issued at this period, did respect the rights of all minorities. Now, is it really fair after Islam ruled in India and had power in India and still allowed the Hindus and others to go to their own religious authorities, to respond to this tolerance and respect by interfering in, suppose even the bill is good or has something good in it? Who are you to tell Muslims who gave you all privileges and respected your minority right when you were a minority or when they were in power, but now you're betraying that kind of gamil? And it is not only because Muslims were tolerant with others, it is that even if they claim or that they are only a secular society, even if you claim you're secular and always talk about democracy, even though I wonder how that democracy come when it comes to the issue of occupied Kashmir or riots against Muslims and discrimination. Yani, suppose, taking at your word that this is democratic, secular country. Democratic, secular societies, even in the West, recognize the role of religion also, even in civic marriages. Is it not? In Nova Scotia, I'll just give you something close to you. In Nova Scotia, and I'm sure in many other provinces, there are some people like myself, for example, who have a certification, as they call it, marriage officer. So a person who wants to get married, for example, you get the official papers, you apply for the Access Nova Scotia, you get the paper, I conduct the marriage, and same others like Sheikh Hamza in Dartmouth or other who have certificates. You can officiate it Islamically and becomes valid both Islamically and civically. So, and subhanAllah, they're not really that divergent in many aspects, not in everything. Like, for example, the government requires 2 witnesses to sign. Islam requires at least 2 witnesses to sign. So it's subhanAllah. So it is at least some kind of difference to religion, even in a secular society. Is Britain secular or not? Well, officially secular, even though, of course, the Queen claims to be the protector of the Anglican faith, but aside from that. But it is essentially democratic, secular society. When there is a case of divorce or family issue brought before the courts, they go more than the Americans even, or Canadian. They consult with the Sharia Council, and I know the brother who's in charge of that for long, Dr. Suhaib Hassan, a Pakistani brother, a scholar, very good scholar, mashallah. So they, not to say what to do, of course, because they can't have a law beside parallel laws or law above law, that the law of the land, that's accepted principle in all of this country. But at least they say that, or not say it, but I say imply from what they do, that if a judge were to give a fair ruling, then he better consult in religious matters with someone who knows about that religion. So that Sharia Council in Britain had been consulted in cases like that. It's not binding on the judge, but a fair judge would consider that. So, but what I'm saying that not only because Muslims gave the Indians, when they were in power, all their religious rights, and if there was any period that this didn't happen, I'm not aware of it, it's not the spirit of Islam or teaching of Islam, really. Then by what right are you interfering and giving no regard of the religious sentiments of Muslims? Having said that, I have already indicated that the notion of triple divorce in one sitting, while some hold that view, in fact, the evidence seems to stand against it, especially when one is not just attached to this madhab or that madhab. The proper methodology is above madhab is to go back to the 2 primary sources of Islam, the Quran and the sound sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And you have heard it already. The ayat and hadith are crystal clear. And the spirit of maintaining the family as one of the maqasid of Sharia has been made quite clear, at least in my humble understanding. So yes, I personally have always been against people divorcing by repeating, I divorce you 3 times in 1 minute, and it becomes irrevocable. We've seen the procedures also in the whole issue of family dissolution. But the bill then say that the main rationale, they say, that this triple divorce is consistent with the Quranic teaching. And when did we have Hindus act as the muftis of Islamic Sharia and Islamic law of marriage and divorce? They might have heard it from some Muslims who have no depth in understanding Sharia in word and spirit. Okay? It is not. We have seen that. This is some people hold that view, but it doesn't say, the Quran say that. In fact, the Quran implies something quite different from what they claim. So that claim is just like considering George Bush was a mufti for Muslims, or Donald Trump is the most super mufti of Muslims, telling them what Islam teaches or what doesn't teach. The second argument, of course, they say that this is unfair to women. It hurts women and it is against equality. All right, I'm not going to talk about equality and equity, inshallah, in the new series, like you said, Bismillah, the 3rd week of January, beginning with more details on that. But for the time being, we can say that even equity or equality, in the secular sense, it doesn't. Why? Here, I refer to the opinion given by Dr. Jamal, when he says, rightfully, understanding his own society, you see, it will be devastating and harmful for women. In other words, the pretext is to protect women and assure equality and welfare of the family or divorced women. It doesn't. Why? Because it goes as far as imprisoning. You say, all right, when you say triple divorce, it's valid, but you go to jail for 3 years. All right. Aside from the brutality of this kind of purported protective thing for women, it hurts women more. You know why? In Islam, even if a woman is divorced and she had, for example, children from that husband, aside from the protection afforded in Sharia but not in secular laws of support for at least 3 months, 3 months could be 9 months depending on the iddah case, pregnant or not. In addition to what the Quran urges, mut'at al-talaq, فَمَتِّعُوهُنَّ, the Quran refers to that, but the difference of interpretation, is it something حَقًّا عَلَى الْمُحْسِنِينَ, it's extra, not required, but you should do it, or whether it is required, whatever interpretation. In addition to that, she should be given some compensation. If she had a baby and she nursed that baby, he has to pay her for suckling her own baby and suckling could continue for 2 years. As much والوالدات يرضعن أولادهن حولين كاملين, 2 years, لمن أراد أن يتم الرضاعة. And what is the obligation during this رضاعة? You're paying her for رضاعة. وعلى المولود له رزقهن وكسوتهن بالمعروف. And the father, or the one to whom the children were born, the father, has the obligation to support their wives, كسوتهن, supporting them, providing them with their clothing. So these are all forms of protection. If he has children and the wife is not married or remarried, and most women usually when they have such children, subhanAllah, they sacrifice a lot in raising their children. So if he's not married or doesn't have source of income, the husband would have to pay child support because these are his children. All of these privileges in Sharia Sharia that some people, it's a monster, unfair to women. All these protections, according to that secular law to protect women, so-called, are gone. So the families would even thrown into crisis, financially even, as a result of that law. It's better, actually. The husband would be out to work, because if he is in jail, then he and his wife, if he has other wives or remarried, so other women and other children are the ones who suffer as a result of this type of bill. This is just a contemporary applied issue, because Sharia is not some abstract things. Sharia doesn't deal even with detailed laws. You might say all of these laws are Sharia based, but Sharia really, if you look at it in essence, as in previous segment and program from Masjid al-Ummah here, Sharia aims at protecting faith, safeguarding faith, life, mind, family, honor, property. All of these are the maqasid of Sharia that no one can say it is invalid or became obsolete. There might be difference of interpretation in certain detailed aspects of the law. So I hope I didn't take too much or dwell on it, but I thought it is relevant. And for those who might be listening, inshallah, to the series on family, women and family, we'll come to that in more details, but at least I thought that addressing that today, just one day after that law, may be of help to my brothers and sisters in this highly misunderstood, highly controversial issue, to respond to the questions that their friends or others might be raising. I do hope that it might be, with the blessing of Allah, inshallah, some degree of help in living up to the events and be able to comment on them in an Islamic manner, based on facts, based on the Quran and Sunnah. And the thing that I warn most against is to go irrationally in emotional feeling and behave in any way that is violent, which is actually backfire. Many people, fair people at least, are willing to listen. If you deal with them in respect, don't attack them, explain rationally. Most reasonable people, I think, will be convinced at least of most of what you're saying, if not all of it. May Allah help us all to understand our faith, to implement it, to continue having our unshaking trust in the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His teaching, and make us guided and able to guide others as well. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. The Isha is 7? 7? We have? 6:30? No, I think it was changed. I think we still have, we still have about 7 minutes. I think the brother here has questions.
In the third divorce time, could the husband have the ability to return his wife?
No. The third time, التالتة تبتة زي the Egyptians say. No, it is becomes, no. Unless, like I say, she get married without any plan, not to return to her husband, and then she discovered that her husband was better even, so that husband divorced her, then she can return back. The first two, and they usually are referred to as revocable divorce, because within the waiting period, the iddah, he can return his wife without any new contract. That's why it's revocable. But once it is
the wife has to make iddah, but he can't return.
Yeah, well, of course, if there is reason, the same hikmah or wisdom to make sure that she's not pregnant, for example, from him, and get the lineage mixed up, I think it makes sense. But he cannot return her because that's it. The idea here, again, is the wasatiyya, the just balance of Islam. You don't open the door wide. And in fact, one hadith, I don't remember the exact text of it, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, one of you play with the word of Allah, you say, I divorced, I return, I divorce, I return. And that also for the protection of women. You know how a person, if he wants really to give hard time and is so unjust to his wife, he can divorce her, and one day before the end of the iddah, he returns her. Okay? And the Quran says clear, وَبُعُولَتُهُنَّ أَحَقُّ بِرَدِّهِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ أَنْ أَرَادُوا إِصْلَاحًا. During the waiting period, everything is on hold. And if the husband changes his mind, it's good for the family anyway. He has the right to return her because he's the one who initiated divorce in most cases. Okay? What was I saying? I lost track a little bit. Yeah, so if one really wants to be unjust, one day before the end of the iddah, he say, I return you. So return her. Stay with her 1 week or even one day, and divorce her again, the second time. And again, during that period, he can return her. So she cannot remarry for the three months. And if there is no limit, you can do that for years, until she dies. Or he dies before. It opens the door for abuse. But in the meantime, it doesn't say, all right, only one chance. Either to say there is no divorce period, or to say, okay, only one chance, and that's it, final. No. So there is a second. It's always the notion of giving me another chance may work. But after three, so the wasat here, not opening the door wide, that would hurt women, and not restricted, which may hurt both of them if they're not really suited to one another. Wallahu a'lam. Subhanallah. تفضل يا أخي سفيان.
From the girl's side, from the woman's side, if they know they can reconcile with the first husband, but they have valid talaq, and can she marry the muta marriage with somebody to come back?
No. As we said earlier, no.
Was there a system of that type of muta marriage?
One aspect that is very clear from the text of Quran, text of Hadith, and spirit of both, that marriage is not for a limited period of time, at least intention. The intention for marriage is for permanency. If you open the door of saying temporary marriage, when somebody says can marry 100 women every night, temporary marriage. By the way, I'm not saying that some madhab say that, but just to give you an example, if things are left without regulation. No. In all Sunni madhab that I know of, the temporary marriage is invalid. It is the closest thing actually to adultery or fornication. But secondly, but if you say if she goes and marries another person, earlier we said that this is forbidden as well, and the Prophet ﷺ condemned that, and some people can become professionals even earning money just by sarki muhallil. And like I said, those who know Arabic, the Prophet ﷺ described him katais al-musta'ar, like a borrowed bull. For that, it is not permissible, and it actually sensibly it goes around the law. Really, it's going from a back door to make it lawful. The idea is to stick to the procedures and the teaching as we find in the Quran and Sunnah in letter and spirit. Wallahu a'lam. تفضل. Allahu a'lam.
What is the consequences can Muslims suffer from this?
I said the most to suffer of that are not only the men who might be thrown in jail for 3 years, but women themselves who would have been entitled to some payment by that husband who's in jail. Their motive, Allah knows. It could be ignorance, sincere ignorance. It could be some Muslims who tried to persuade them, those who won't go along with any government or anyone in power. And it could be a step in trying to, Allahu A'lam, I'm not saying that bil qat'a. It could be to destroy the main thing that has been destroyed in the Muslim Ummah fully. Yet they destroyed Muslim Ummah politically, militarily, life-wise, and everything. But one thing still remaining in general, even though it's subject to attacks now, is the Muslim family. And this is why, inshallah, the planned series in January would deal with women and family. This is what kept the Muslim community together, not only recently, but throughout the centuries. And by putting families like that, it might result in crisis within families. And when you have crises like that, how could these families raise their children in an Islamic manner? I noticed that our beloved Imam, and of course you can ask him the more difficult question. I'll answer the simpler one, inshallah, but he is more than capable to answer you and others. And هو ينظر إلي من طرف خفي. He's looking at me, maybe in a very gentle reminder that it is Isha time and we do respect time. جزاكم الله خيرا. لا, respect time inshallah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. Other question, you can ask Sheikh Abdullah after that or ask me after Salah, but not in a formal, يعني informal. جزاكم الله خير إخوان. It is your duty to correct me if there is any wrong.